Welcome to The Author Show, where we feature new authors and books, from fiction to self-help and everything in between. You'll find it all at theauthorshow.com. That's theauthorshow.com. And now let the show begin.
Hi, this is The Author Show, and I'm your host, Linda Thompson. Before I introduce our guest, just a quick reminder that selected interviews are available in our iPhone app, which can be downloaded in the App Store, as well as on TV on the Roku channel and Amazon Fire TV. Our app name on all platforms is The Author's Show. Our book is Savoring the Camino de Santiago. It's the pilgrimage, not the hike. Written by our guest, Julie Connor. Savoring the Camino de Santiago is her memoir about her journey along this road that has been around since 820 AD as a pilgrimage trail. Julie joins us to share more about her journey. Julie, welcome to The Author Show.
Well, thank you, Linda, for having me talk to you and have a chance to connect with your audience.
Julie, will you please give us a quick overview of Savoring the Camino de Santiago?
Linda, you started out by saying that my book is a memoir, and you're exactly right about that, but it's more than a memoir. It's also a guidebook for people who are thinking about walking the Camino or would like to be armchair travelers along the Camino. So it's a hybrid. It's both a guidebook and also a memoir. It's unusual in the field. Most of the books about the Camino are just memoirs or guidebooks, but my book combines two, so that a reader can understand what's required to walk the Camino and also experience it along with me, all in one book.
Do you think that was a challenge, putting those two together?
It was, and I tell you, I was nervous about it and concerned about it because it's a hybrid. It's not pure one or pure the other, and I had to think a lot about how to make it work, how to connect it. Should I have alternating chapters or a braided kind of approach, or just half in one and half in the other, or how to do it?
Or even two books?
Or even two books, yes, or even two books.
Julie, you made the pilgrimage in 2016. Why did you decide to take this journey?
To tell the truth, I decided to do this journey 45 years ago when I was in my early 20s. I read a book by James Michener. You might remember James Michener. Mm-hmm. He was a very popular writer back when, and he wrote a book called Iberia. And in his chapter 13 of that book, it was all about the Camino de Santiago. And as soon as I read that chapter, I said, I want to do this. I want to go visit this part of Spain, which I hadn't ever visited. But it took me 45 years to actually fulfill that desire, that commitment.
Well, congratulations for making it. So now I want to know, did you actually walk the entire 500 miles of the road or just portions of it?
I traveled the entire 500 miles and I walked most of it, but I didn't walk every last step. My son traveled with me and he developed plantar fasciitis, so he couldn't walk. After a while, the doctor said, don't walk. And so we had to work out a kind of, hopscotch kind of trip. He'd take the bus, I'd walk. He'd take a taxi, I'd walk. We'd meet up at the end of the day. And sometimes I just would go with him however he went, so he didn't feel so lonely. Anyway, I walked most of the trip, and I certainly walked and got my Compostela, which is the certificate that I've completed the pilgrimage.
Congratulations on that. That's quite an honor. So while you were doing the walk, or even before you decided to do the walk, did you think that you'd be writing a book about it?
No, I didn't. I had no plans to write a book when I set out on the traveling. But as I was walking along with lots of time to think, I was thinking of all the things that I wish someone had told me before I set out. And I was thinking, I have something to share.
Who do you believe would be an ideal reader for your book?
An ideal reader would be someone who is thinking about walking the Camino and wants to say, is this really for me? That's one big group of readers. Another would be someone who says, I can't do it. I'm not physically able, or I don't have the time or money, but I would like to know what it's like. What is this adventure going to be like? So those are two big groups of people who could enjoy my book.
What do you think makes Savoring the Camino de Santiago stand out in a crowd?
Well, as I said, it's quite different from most books. If you just skim through the front covers of most of the books on the Camino, They'll show a single walker on a lonely path all by themselves in the middle of nowhere. That's probably 90% of the covers of the Camino books. My cover, on the other hand, has a mosaic-like approach. It shows food, it shows a cathedral, it shows symbols of the Camino, it shows a panoply of what you're going to experience on the Camino. And that's what I wanted to give readers, was an idea of how they could experience the Camino in many different ways, not just the pilgrimage, not just the walk, but the whole experience.
Did you take all of those beautiful photos that are shown on the cover?
I wish I did. But no, I am an artist in the sense that I'm a writer, but I'm not an artist as in a graphic artist. So I got a wonderful Spanish artist to help me put together the cover. I knew what I wanted. I knew I wanted a mosaic, but I didn't know how to make it work. And so he provided the frame for the cover.
Julie, you've also written other books. Please share a little bit about those with us.
Well, my most recent book, and one I have to tell you I'm extremely proud of, is called The Baby with 3 Families, 2 Countries, and 1 Promise, an international adoption story. It is a book about adoption for children. Most books about adoption are for parents, but this is specifically for children. When they can first understand, when they're 2 or 3 years old, all the way up until they're 6 or 7 or 8. And it answers a lot of questions that children have about, why am I adopted? What does it mean? It's a unique book in that there's no other book like it on the market.
What a phenomenal idea, and something that's been very badly needed for a long time. So are you planning to write any other books?
Oh, yes. I have a lot of ideas in my head and not enough time to do it. But my very next book is going to be another book about the Camino. I have done it, and now I have to write the book on horseback.
Oh, cool. So you spent many years working for the U.S. Foreign Service and have lived all over the world. Do you have a favorite place across the world that you would like to go back to?
Oh, my goodness. I've loved every place I've lived and worked, and that's why I stayed in the Foreign Service for so long. I went back to 2 of the countries because I had such a wonderful time when I was there, and I wanted to go back and spend more time there. So every country I visited had something special about it that made it wonderful. For example, you're not going to find a more beautiful, physically beautiful country than Guatemala, where I had the luxury to spend 3 years. On the other hand, if you want exotic, there is no country, nowhere that is exotic to an American as Indonesia. I had the opportunity to spend 2 years there. I recently went back to Indonesia. It's just a fascinating country. So I've loved everywhere. It's hard for me to pick one out. If you say, which was the most politically interesting? No question about it, that would be Israel. But every place has something about it that's wonderful.
When did you first realize that you wanted to be an author?
I guess as a child, when my writing would be singled out in class as being very good, I knew that I had a talent for it. Really, to tell the truth, at first I was thinking more of being a journalist. And most of my career, I was writing journalistic kinds of pieces, memoranda, briefing papers, speeches for the ambassador, that kind of writing. It's only in retirement that I've had the luxury to really do some, what they call creative nonfiction, which is what my memoir is, and then just straight fiction, which is my children's book.
Julie, what's been the most rewarding experience for you since publishing your first book?
Oh my goodness. I've really enjoyed the opportunity to promote knowledge about the Camino. And I do quite a lot of Zooms with groups, community groups like Rotary clubs and so forth, to talk about the Camino. Information and knowledge about it is growing tremendously, geometrically, I would say. But still, the majority of people I meet say, what's the Camino? I've never heard of it. So I try to explain and interest them in the history of this wonderful, wonderful pilgrimage trail.
Well, let's go back to your book. How long did it take you to travel the road?
49 days was our trip, but we went very slowly. And that was on purpose because, as my title says, I wanted to savor the experience. And I did. We would stop in the big towns so we could visit the museums and the cathedrals, which, by the way, are magnificent, and just the culture. And every week we would take a day just to recoup, to have a little bit of rest and have a chance to do all the mundane things one has to do, like the laundry. So we went along slowly, but that's the way I personally believe people should travel the Camino.
Well, since your son was traveling by basically public transportation, he could carry your luggage. But when you first started out and the two of you were walking, how did you get all of your stuff from point A to point B?
You know, you've hit on an area of great sensitivity among Camino people. There are purists who think you have to carry everything you're going to wear and use on your back in a backpack. And there are those who don't believe that. And I, at my age and in my condition, was not planning to travel with everything I was going to wear for 6 weeks on my back. So we used, and many people on the Camino do use, a service that moves your luggage for you from one place to the next place each day. It's very well organized. You just leave your bag and go on out the door, and someone comes along like a magic fairy, picks up your bag and delivers it to the next place you're going to be staying the night.
All right, now I got to ask this one because my curiosity's got the best of me. What happens if you don't make it to the next place?
Well, that is one of the things that people debate a lot. There are those who love the freedom of just walking, and when they're ready to stop, stopping, and then looking around to see, where am I going to stay? And there are those like me who don't want to have to worry the whole day about, will I find a bed at the end of this day? So we book in advance. So I kind of knew every day where I was supposed to end up. The negative of that is, if you find a wonderful something or other and you'd like to stop, you can't. You have to get to your destination that night. So there's pros and cons of both, but I was very happy with the choices I made.
Julie, what would you like readers to remember most after reading Savoring the Camino de Santiago?
Really, I think I did a good job of summing it up in my title. I want them to savor the experience. I don't want them just to think they need to get from point A to point B in 2 weeks and run along the trail, which some people do. People even brag about how fast they've done it. And for me, those people are missing the point of this pilgrimage. I think taking your time, savoring the food, the culture, the wine, the people that you meet along the way is the most important part of the whole trip.
Julie, will you please read a short excerpt from Savoring the Camino de Santiago for us?
Thanks, Linda. I'd love to. I picked a chapter called The Baby Carriage. Along the Camino, you see every sort of travel group: singles, pairs, couples holding hands, groups, large groups, even one very pregnant young woman, parents with children, people walking with dogs. I always looked over the children closely. I myself found the walking very strenuous. How would a 6-year-old kid manage it? One time we met and chatted with a threesome on bikes, father, mother, and son, who was about 10 years old. I knew how James had hated biking uphill, so I was curious about how this boy was doing on the many hills and mountains of the Camino. His parents both averred that he was doing great. They had just started the Camino, so he had only had 1 day of biking so far, but he had done wonderfully that first day. The boy himself seemed happy. He was proud of staying up with his parents and even boasted of being in the lead at times. Clearly, this was an adventure he was relishing. The other children we saw also seemed happy as they walked, skipped, and ran along. I overheard no whining or complaining. I became used to seeing all sorts. Even so, I was taken aback one day at what I saw. James and I were struggling down a steep, scree-covered slope. You had to really keep focused because the slippery rocks under your feet made every step treacherous. Walking sticks were a huge help, and I don't know how many times I would have fallen without them. This, for me, was dangerous going. I had already broken my ankle once years previously, and the last thing I wanted was another broken ankle or leg. If I fell and injured myself along this largely inaccessible trail, how would emergency workers even get to me, much less carry me out? I went extremely slowly, planting my walking stick securely, carefully putting each foot down and testing the footing before fully shifting my weight onto that foot, and always being ready for the slides that inevitably happened despite my care. This was tiring and anxiety-producing hiking, so I stopped often to look around. I needed to remind myself of the beauty of the countryside and to remember the reasons why I was doing the walk. Thanks to my frequent stops, I had plenty of time to observe these two guys toiling up the slope towards us. Seeing them was unusual for two reasons. First, they were going in the wrong direction. That is, they were headed away from, not towards, Santiago de Compostela. The great majority of pilgrims walk to Santiago. Only a tiny fraction walks home again or back to their starting point. In our 2 months of walking, we only saw a handful of pilgrims headed back. The second reason the two men were worth observing was that they were pushing a baby carriage uphill on this scree-filled slope. It was hard enough going downhill. Going up, pushing that carriage must have been hell. I kept wondering about what sort of crazy guys would be bringing a baby on this trip. The only explanation I could think of was that maybe they were locals, not pilgrims, and had no choice about routes to get home. We approached closer and closer. Finally, we stopped, just uphill from them. The hood of the baby carriage was up, shielding the baby from the strong Spanish sun. Usually, pilgrims pass each other with a cheery, "Buen Camino," exchanged. Occasionally, a pilgrim will ask a question about the route ahead, how far to the next town, or whether the other pilgrim has seen a certain individual on the Camino. After I exchanged a few words with this pair, it was clear that these two men were foreign pilgrims, not locals. I continued to wonder about what in the world they were doing, bringing a baby on this trip. While I wondered, I minded my manners and did not ask them any of the questions that were fizzing in my head. Where's the mom? How are they feeding the baby? Where are they staying? The pilgrim hostels wouldn't take babies, I was pretty sure. Finally, after a few minutes of chatting about the weather and the route, I broached what I really wanted to know. "Are you on your way home?" "Yes," one of the men replied. "We are going back to our starting point in France." My God, I thought, over the Pyrenees with a baby carriage? "Can I see the baby?" "Sure, take a look." I made my careful way down the slope, stopping by the carriage. I peeked in to see a mass of puppies curled up together. Only then did I notice a bitch sheltering in the shade under the baby carriage. Goodness, what's this? 7 puppies born on the Camino. How old are they? A week. I looked down at the mama dog under the carriage with pity. She'd had to walk to Santiago pregnant, whelp 7 pups, then turn around and go back the other direction while nursing her pups. I wondered, but didn't ask, where they had acquired the baby carriage. And what about dog food for the new mom? I didn't see any in evidence. I looked at the mama dog again and wished I had the courage to tell the 2 guys that they should be giving her a ride in the carriage too. Instead, I just said a heartfelt, "Buen Camino y buena suerte," and moved on down the slope. I'm still wondering if this party of 10 all made it home okay, and I still wish that I had taken a photo of the pups in the baby carriage, the littlest pilgrims I saw.
Oh, my Lord, Julie. I had to mute myself so I could just laugh out loud during a lot of that. What a phenomenal story. I do have an extra question, though. How do you handle emergencies on some of those steep slopes?
It varies. The Spanish are very good. They love their Camino and they do everything they can to keep pilgrims safe and make sure that their needs are met. But the fact is that a lot of the Camino is in inaccessible areas. And so you just have to work at it. I know, well, I was there in one case, a woman had to be lifted off a mountain by helicopter. So
Wow.
It happens.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things happen.
Okay, so now where can we learn more about you, about your other books, and most of all, where can we purchase Savoring the Camino de Santiago?
My book is in all formats. If you're an e-reader or if you would like an audio version, then I suggest that you look on the most popular places for those kinds of versions because it's available as both e-reader and audiobook. If you want a printed copy, I suggest you go to my website, bayoucitypress.com, and go to the shop button, and you can order a printed copy from my website.
And there's also information about you as well as your other books. Is that correct?
That is correct. There's more information there than you'll want to take in one gulp, but I invite you to visit me many times on my website.
We've been talking with Julie Connor, author of Savoring the Camino de Santiago. Julie, thank you so much for taking time to share your book and your exciting journey with us. I doubt if I've talked with many other authors who have as many miles on them as you do, which makes your story so interesting. When you publish your next book, will you come back and chat with us again?
Oh, I'd love to, Linda. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I really hope I've inspired some of your listeners to at least find out what the Camino is about. And I hope some of you will take the leap and go on an adventure, do a pilgrimage on the Camino.
Are you interested in the Camino but afraid of walking? Do you like art, architecture, history, and culture? Does learning about one woman's Camino journey appeal to you? Would you like tips on designing a unique Camino trip? If so, please go to bayoucitypress.com and order Julie's book today. And when you finish reading, don't forget to post a review. And please share this interview with your friends so that they too may become acquainted with their author. And remember, the Author Show may be accessed at any time at theauthorshow.com. Plus, selected interviews can also be found on major platforms such as Amazon Fire TV, the Roku channel, Google Podcasts, Pandora, Amazon Music, and many more. Whether you're an author who would like to be featured or a reader in search of new books, theauthorshow.com is a really great place to start.
Thanks for listening to The Author Show. Find out more about authors and their work at theauthorshow.com. Theauthorshow.com. Tune in next time to another great author on The Author Show.